The savannah was quiet in the way that only followed violence. Wind moved through the tall golden grass in long, patient ripples, bending the heavy seed heads toward a horizon where heat rose in trembling sheets. The afternoon sun pressed down without mercy, flattening every shadow to a thin black line and baking the dry earth scent of dust, dried blood, and iron deep into the air. Flies moved in lazy, metallic loops above places where life had ended recently. Dr. Mara Ellison walked slowly between the scattered rocks, her boots crunching over soil so brittle it sounded like breaking bones. The call from the ranger had come just after lunch, another snare, another life claimed by wire and human greed. She had driven the battered Land Cruiser as far as the track allowed, then continued on foot, water bottle clipped to her belt, camera slung across her back, the familiar weight of binoculars pulling at her neck. Illegal traps were almost never selective. They waited with the same indifferent patience for anything large enough to step into the noose. Kudu, impala, warthog, hyena, leopard, whatever walked past became collateral. And something had. The adult leopard lay motionless near the edge of an acacia thicket, the thin steel cable still cinched cruelly tight around her ribcage, cutting so deep that the fur around the wound had matted into dark, sticky ropes. She had fought hard. Claw marks scored the red earth in long, desperate arcs. Broken grass lay flattened in wide, frantic circles. Tufts of fur clung to thorns where she had torn herself trying to reach backward, but starvation, shock, and exhaustion always won in the end. Mara knelt beside the body, jaw tightening until her teeth ached. "I'm sorry," she murmured, the words small and useless against the vast afternoon. She had said them too many times. They never changed anything. Before we begin this incredible true wildlife story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more powerful animal rescue stories like this, and comment where you're watching from. I love seeing viewers from around the world. She pulled on nitrile gloves, opened her field notebook, and began the grim documentation. GPS coordinates, photographs from multiple angles, measurements of the snare, notes on the animal's age and condition. Routine kept the emotion at arm's length. Then, a sound stopped her. Not wind. Not the metallic whine of flies. Not the distant call of a lilac-breasted roller. A faint, rasping cry, small, uneven, fragile as cracked porcelain. Mara froze, pencil suspended. She waited, ears straining past her own heartbeat. There it came again, thinner this time, almost swallowed by the heat. Her gaze moved toward the cluster of sun-bleached rocks 20 meters away, half hidden by dried grasses. She rose slowly, careful not to startle whatever had made the sound. Between two large stones, sheltered from the worst of the sun, lay a tiny shape no larger than her forearm. A cub. Female. Barely 2 weeks old, perhaps less. Her spotted coat was dulled by dust and dehydration. Ribs showed plainly beneath the thin skin. Eyes were half-sealed, crusted at the corners. Each breath came shallow and labored. When Mara crouched closer, the cub tried to lift her head, only the faintest tremor of effort, then let it drop again. No strength left even to protest. The mother had dragged herself this far, back toward the den she must have hidden in the rocks, before the snare and blood loss finally stopped her. The cub had waited. How long? A day? 2? Long enough that hope had thinned to instinct. Mara removed her wide-brimmed hat and held it above the little body, blocking the direct hammer of the sun. The cub gave a weak chirp, not fear, simply the automatic sound infants make when searching for warmth, for milk, for mother. For a long moment, Mara stared down at her. Wildlife protocol was unambiguous, minimal intervention whenever possible. Orphaned predators were to be left unless active rehabilitation facilities existed and release was realistically achievable. Most facilities refused big cats, too expensive, too risky, too likely to produce animals that could never be wild again. But this cub would not live another hour. Not in this heat. Not without fluids. Not without someone to stimulate her to urinate and defecate. Not without warmth and safety. Mara exhaled through her nose, decision already made. She slipped off her field jacket, folded it once, and wrapped the fragile body gently against her chest, tucking the small head beneath her chin. The cub's breathing hitched, then steadied as body heat seeped through fabric. "You're coming with me," she whispered. If this story is touching your heart so far, take a second to like the video. It really helps the channel grow. The cub settled instantly against the steady drum of Mara's heartbeat, tiny paws curling inward as though remembering how to hold on. The research station was never built for infants. It consisted of 6 prefab buildings arranged in a rough horseshoe: lab, office, staff quarters, kitchen, vehicle shed, and a small medical room that doubled as everything else. No incubator, no nursery, no protocol for hand-rearing apex predators. Mara improvised. A large plastic storage crate became a nest lined first with clean towels, then with 2 hot water bottles wrapped in flannel to mimic littermate warmth. She mixed kitten milk replacer at precise dilution, tested temperature against her wrist until it felt exactly right, filled a 10 ml syringe fitted with a soft nipple. Every 2 hours, around the clock, she fed. The first night she did not sleep. Suri, for that was the name Mara gave her the next morning, after the faint rose gold flush returning to her ears cried constantly. Thin, desperate wails that sliced through the quiet station and carried out into the dark. Only when Mara lifted her, cradled her against her chest, rocked slowly in the old camp chair, did the cries taper into soft hiccuping chirps. Okay. Mara sighed at 3:17 a.m., voice hoarse. I'm here. She named her Suri Rose because the warmth coming back into the tiny body felt like the first color after drought. Days blurred into routines measured in milliliters, temperature checks, gentle stimulation with warm damp cotton, weigh-ins on the postal scale borrowed from the office. Dehydration eased. The sunken flanks began to fill. Eyes opened fully, deep amber irises that fixed on Mara's face with startling focus and trust. Imprinting happened gradually, then completely. Suri followed Mara's scent trail across the room. She turned her head toward Mara's voice before the door even opened. She slept only when touching skin usually curled inside the crook of Mara's elbow or sprawled across her collarbone. When placed alone in the crate, she cried until lifted again, paws scrabbling at the sides in panic. Colleagues noticed. You'll need distance eventually, the senior ranger, Joseph, said one evening as he leaned in the doorway. She's bonding too hard. Mara nodded without looking up from the syringe. I know, but not yet. The cub needed survival first. Weeks passed into months. Suri grew fast awkwardly at first, then with startling grace. Paws stayed comically oversized for weeks, tripping her constantly. She wobbled after Mara through the small fenced yard behind the medical building, pouncing clumsily at drifting leaves, at dust motes, at her own tail. She chirped constantly, a soft, bird-like sound that meant safety, contentment, mother. She slept across Mara's lap during late-night data entry. She learned Mara's schedule better than Mara remembered it herself, knew when the 6 a.m. feeding was due, when Mara left for transect walks, when she returned smelling of acacia and dust. At night, she curled beside the cot, rising instantly whenever Mara shifted, making sure the human never disappeared. Their bond deepened into something powerful and consuming. To Suri, Mara was not caretaker. She was world. Food came from her hands. Safety came from her scent. Warmth came from her heartbeat. Everything came from her. By 1 year old, Suri was physically magnificent. Muscle rolled smoothly beneath sleek golden fur dappled with perfect black rosettes. Her stride had become silent, deliberate, liquid. Her eyes carried the sharp, calculating awareness of a born predator. She moved like shadow given weight. But emotionally, she remained a cub. She refused meat placed in the enclosure unless Mara stayed in sight. If Mara stepped beyond the fence line, Suri paced frantically along the wire, calling in deep, confused roars that carried for kilometers. Attempts to introduce scent markers from wild leopards collected scat. Rubbed bedding produced only avoidance. She retreated to Mara's side, pressing against her legs instead of investigating. She hunted training lures with lethal precision, leaping from branches, striking with textbook throat bites, but always returned immediately to drop the kill at Mara's feet, tail high, waiting for praise. Not independence. Dependency. Mara watched the pattern solidify quietly, painfully, undeniably. Suri could never survive in the wild while believing she belonged to a human, and that belief was Mara's fault. Love had saved her life. Now love threatened it. The decision crystallized on a moonless night when Suri pressed against the fence, crying for Mara to come back inside the enclosure after lights out. The sound was raw, bewildered, lost. Mara stood in the monitoring room, hands clenched until nails bit palms, refusing to move. No, she whispered to the dark window. You have to learn. She stopped hand-feeding. Food was left in the enclosure and Mara walked away. She stopped responding to every chirp and call. She limited her presence to distant observation from the blind. Suri became agitated, pacing, vocalizing, searching the perimeter obsessively. The distress cut deeper than Mara had prepared for. Several times she nearly ran back inside, nearly broke the protocol she herself had set. But she didn't. Days became weeks. Then, something shifted. Suri began exploring farther from the gate. She stalked birds alone in the tall grass. She rested high in fever trees without once looking toward the buildings for reassurance. Months later, when a wild male scent drifted across the reserve on an evening breeze, Suri did not retreat. She lifted her head, nostrils flaring, then moved cautiously toward the scent trail, curious, engaged, behaving like a leopard for the first time. Mara watched through binoculars from the blind, relief and heartbreak arriving in the same breath. Release approval came at the end of the dry season. The enclosure gates were opened onto protected reserve land that stretched beyond sight: thorn scrub, seasonal pans, granite copies, and miles of golden grassland. No fences, no roads, only wild. Suri stood at the threshold, uncertain. For a long moment, she turned back toward the familiar buildings, toward the small figure standing motionless near the gate. Mara stayed still. She refused to call, refused to gesture, refused even to meet the amber eyes searching for her. Slowly, Suri approached. She pressed her broad forehead gently against Mara's open hand one final time, the same gesture she had used as a cub when asking to be carried. Then she turned and ran. Golden body stretched long and low into the tall grass, vanishing toward the waiting wild male whose scent still hung on the wind. Mara remained standing long after the grass stopped moving. Months passed with no confirmed sightings. Trackers occasionally found prints too large to be anyone else's, but the reserve was vast and leopards are ghosts when they choose to be. Then one morning the radio crackled urgently. "Doc Joseph, you need to see this." Mara drove out immediately, dust plume rising behind the cruiser. Near a shallow watering area shaded by shepherd's trees, a familiar shape emerged from thick brush. Suri. Larger now, more solid, movements fluid and self-assured. Scars small, clean marked her muzzle and shoulder from fights she had won. Her eyes carried the calm distance of an adult, and behind her two small cubs, half hidden in the grass, peering with wide, curious eyes. Suri approached calmly, stopping several yards away. No frantic chirping, no desperate pressing, only recognition. She lowered her head slightly, acknowledgement, not submission. The cubs tumbled forward a few steps, then froze, watching the strange upright creature with their mother's face. They stayed several hours. Suri rested in deep shade while the cubs nursed, played, explored. Mara observed quietly from a respectful distance, camera forgotten on the seat beside her. At dusk, Suri rose, gathered her cubs with a low chuff, and walked back into the savannah. No hesitation, no looking back. Mara exhaled slowly, tears slipping free without shame. Her final report listed the rehabilitation as a complete success. Animal healthy, reproducing, fully integrated into natural social structure. But the document could never capture the truth. That saving Suri required letting her go. That love was not proven in holding on, but in stepping aside until the one you raised no longer needed your hands. And somewhere beyond sight, a wild leopard lived exactly as she was meant to, not alone, not dependent, but free. Sometimes the greatest act of care is becoming unnecessary. And sometimes, the one you raised returns not to stay, but to show you that you did it right. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like Suri's remind us why compassion matters.